It's one of two with Rufus Sewell as Andrew, and it will be very interesting to see because they've got the second one later in the year, I presume, a very royal scandal, I think it's called. But that will have Martin Sheen as Andrew. But there's no doubt that I think it will be considerably watched. I think the funny aspect of this is that this particular broadcast, this particular interview, I mean, it's just part of mythology, really. I think that it will never, so to speak, fade away. I think that always in public relations, that this interview will be shown to pupils as an example of what under no circumstances to do, how absolutely terrifying it was. I mean, one could call it a car crash of Krakatoan proportions. It really was bizarre. Firstly, reports are that Princess Beatrice certainly not happy with it. Apparently she features, and maybe it will tell us a bit more about what, if anything, she had to do with it. But I mean, so far as Andrew's concerned, he's only been visible at events that are religious ceremonies, the induction of the new Dean of Windsor, the memorial service to King Constantine, because William, as we know now why, pulled out at the last minute. Andrew and Sarah Ferguson appeared to be, so to speak, very prominent. And I don't think that's what the royal family wants, but it was a private service. That was the way it was. And of course, the Easter service at St. George's Chapel. But then again, you've got a religious service. I mean, that he's still a member of the royal family, hasn't been convicted of anything. And from that point of view, when it comes to religious services, that seems to me perfectly fine. It's what's happening. And Sarah Ferguson is, of course, as we know, unwell. She had a mastectomy last year, and she's now apparently has melanoma. So that, so far as it goes, that is as far as it's going to go. There's absolutely no way, but no way at all, that he's not, given the fact that he's not doing anything charitable. Indeed, as far as I know, he's not doing anything at all. The issue about Epstein, the deceased paedophile, and also Ghislaine Maxwell, a convicted sex trafficker. I mean, the issue is perfectly clear. The interview and these two depictions of it, one of them with Rufus Sewell as Andrew. I mean, they will remind people of how horrendous it was, but it will also remind people, this is very significant, how entitled a member of the royal family can be, how, in point of fact, you regard yourself, despite a distinguished career in the Navy, where he saw action in the Falklands, and I mean, he was at ease there. He seemed very good in those days. He was known affectionately, and subsequently everything has changed. And one of the reasons is that he is, as the interview proved, totally bovine. The other is that he has this terrifyingly entitled streak. And I mean, when people are reminded, and I think you'll find millions tuning in again to see a depiction of it, in both cases, both the one that is going to be shown on Friday Scoop and then a subsequent one, which will be shown apparently later in the year. I mean, Scoop is part of Netflix, and I think you'll find a lot of people, I think they'll watch it on Friday because there's been so much free publicity. I think it will be very harmful. It's very embarrassing for the royal family. This interview took place at Buckingham Palace. The Queen wouldn't have the faintest idea of what was going to happen. And the parts of it have entered legend. When I talk about legend, I mean comedy legend. The sweating, which hasn't been explained. The weird Pizza Express in Woking aspect of it. But the serious part of it, of course, was the fact that he expressed absolutely no remorse for the victims of Epstein. Indeed, he didn't see, on the whole, he regarded it as favourable that he his connection with them, even though it cost him his job as special envoy for British trade. The fact that when asked if he regretted his association with the deceased paedophile Jeffrey Epstein, he answered that he didn't. He met such interesting people. He'd forgotten that he'd lost his job as special representative of British trade because of his friendship with Epstein, and of course, subsequently, we know how close he was to Ghislaine Maxwell, and she's currently serving time as a child sex trafficker. So it's an appalling business. But the facts are that the way he approached this interview, it will be interesting to see that, because that is something that previously a lot of people are unaware of the ins and outs behind it, and I certainly would be very, very interested to see how it was actually set up. And that two depictions of it. One of them features Rufus Sewell, the other, I gather, featured Martin Sheen as Andrew. And so those who, well, a lot of people will see both. I mean, this is so notorious, it's so absolutely ghastly, that if you talked about anyone being as foolish as he was before it happened, you wouldn't have been believed. And since this happened, he thought it went well, apparently. So this will be very embarrassing, and it won't be helpful for the royal family because, as you say, Andrew has appeared recently quite often. But I stress that those are only in the context of religious services of one sort or another, and there's no question of him doing anything else. Not foreseeably, absolutely not. The best way of resolving this rift, if it is to be resolved, was to do it privately. That there was certainly no case, though, no question of say, Harry and children coming over without Meghan. And I'm sure that Harry and Meghan will act so far as what the Sussexes do in, together. Whether or not, or what Meghan personally thinks now, or at this moment, is impossible to say. We don't know. Things can happen that you don't expect. And when you look at the time scale between now and the Invictus commemoration at St. Paul's, it's still quite a time. It's perfectly possible Harry could come over before then to see his father. Whether or to what extent he might see William or see William and Catherine or whatever, I simply don't know. But I did say, and this is what was quoted, that Meghan is very unpopular in Britain. She knows that any appearance she'd make here would make headlines, and they wouldn't necessarily be favourable. And the reason they wouldn't be favourable, which they once were when they married, was because of their behaviour over the last 4 years. You can't be precise. The only, with illness being being an enormous game changer even when there are very deep family rifts. Two very senior members of the royal family are seriously ill, and you can't really predict what's going to happen. So, as I say, the Sussexes do spring surprises, as has happened before, and you never know what might, in the coming weeks and months or whatever, occur. I don't think Harry would do anything without Meghan's consent, and certainly we simply don't know. After Catherine's diagnosis, we know Harry had reached out, and what was said and so forth, we simply don't know. But the best way, obviously, of bridging this rift, if it is to be bridged, and it does make sense when you've got serious illness for everyone to look again, is for this obviously to happen privately. But it's so difficult to answer questions because, you could find you're completely wrong so easily.